Aequalitatem here. Welcome to the 5th episode of an educational series here on the channel, Aequalitatem, an LGBTQ plus educational video series. This series will consist of 8 videos covering the following topics: LGBTQ plus history, sexualities, romantic identities, gender identities, queer representation, relationships, LGBTQ plus discrimination / gatekeeping, and how to be a good ally. This episode we will be talking about how important representation is, different types of queer representation done right, and queer representation done wrong. The goal of this series is to educate people about the LGBTQ plus community to encourage acceptance and understanding of those who may be seen as different than the norm. The name of this series, Aequalitatem, means equality in Latin, and that is what we are promoting in this series. This series is written by an American, and therefore will be focusing more from an American point of view. All resources used in these videos will be available down below, so I encourage you to check them all out for yourselves. I will also be doing my best to answer any questions you put in the comment section below. This video will include some triggering topics at certain parts. Before these parts, a trigger warning will appear with the type of triggering content and a time to skip to avoid listening to it. People from all aspects of the LGBTQ plus community preach about queer representation, and rightfully so. Representation in the sense I'm referring to today is when a group of people, in this case the LGBTQ plus community, is shown in the media in a positive light. Representation is important for any group or problem, not just the LGBTQ plus community. Representation brings awareness to issues and spreads knowledge about certain concerns or situations the group is facing. Representation can enforce a sense of self, a sense of belonging in the world. Knowing someone else is out there that is like you can, as Hayazadi, I'm sorry, I probably butchered that, discussed in their article on the subject, make you feel like you can do anything, which logically makes sense. There's a character in a movie who is like you, and they are doing all this cool stuff, so logically, you can too. The audience of a piece of entertainment media look towards fictional characters that they can relate to, and put themselves in this character's shoes. In the LGBTQ plus community, representation is extremely important as it can help someone discover and accept themselves. For example, I used to identify as a polyromantic lesbian, even though I was constantly questioning that. One day, I found a YouTuber called The Queer Curie, who identified as queer and taught me what it is. Before this, I had encountered using queer as a label before, but never really had the courage to label myself that, because I never saw anyone who identified as it. However, after watching The Queer Curie, I recognized that there are people like that, like me, out there. About a week later, I officially told my friends I identified as queer, and I've never looked back since. Representation of the LGBTQ plus community can show people that they are not alone, that there are people like them out there, that it is okay to be LGBTQ plus, that despite what their family or peers may say, there are people living happy, fulfilled lives that are LGBTQ+. Representation can also help raise awareness about homophobia, transphobia, and all the discrimination LGBTQ+ people still face to this day. It can introduce people to concepts they may not have known existed. It can prevent the shadowing of LGBTQ+ people in the world and can lead us to a more diverse and equal future. However, representation in a bad way can hurt a group. Bad representation is stuff like unrealistic stereotyping, villainization, and more. Now that we know a little about what representation can do, let's take a look at different types of queer representation, both the good and the bad. A great example of the different ways that the LGBTQ plus community can be represented is presented in Alana Cole's article/paper written on the subject in its relation to video games. Within the writing, Cole reviews 3 categories of representation: explicit/implicit, sensual/incidental, and fixed/player-centric. Explicit/implicit is exactly how it sounds. Explicit is when a character's identity or gender attraction is explicitly stated by someone within the game or media, like the character themselves or someone close to them. And implicit is when queer tones are implied but not outright stated in the media. This is a common way that people use to quote-unquote include LGBTQ plus people without angering the homophobic audience. Begin quote, one of the key differences between explicit and implicit representation is often where the focus lies, end quote, Cole stated. They then go on to explain that explicit representation often lies in identification, such as characters labeling themselves within a piece of media. Implicit, on the other hand, is left to behavior and can fall to assumptions of the player. The central/incidental category refers to whether or not the representation is a main point within the piece of media. Central refers to stories and media based fully on a character's sexual, romantic, or gender identity and the struggles they face in similar issues. Incidental, on the contrary, talks about when a passing reference to a character being LGBTQ+ is made without it affecting the gameplay or story too much. Finally, the fixed/player-centric refers to how the character identity affects the story. This category refers mostly to video games only, as in a movie or book, you can't really play a character. Fixed is when a character's sexuality or romantic identity does not change based on the character's gender. Cole uses the example of Dorian from Dragon Age Inquisition as an example of this. Dorian, no matter what the gender of the protagonist, will always say he prefers males and will not carry on a romance with a female character. Player-centric, oppositely, refers to when all romanceable characters can be attracted to the player, no matter the player character gender. This is also referred to as player sexual, as the characters who have a sexuality or a romantic identity of their own. There's a lot of different examples of queer representation done right, as it has been increasing over the past few years. Let's take a look at a few of them. All following art is not mine, so if you enjoy the art, support the artists on their platform. All credit will be in the description. The video game Undertale by Toby Fox has two great examples of queer representation within it. Firstly, it is stated in the true pacifist route of the game that the imperial scientists Dr. Elfies and heterosexual god Undyne have a crush on one another, even going on a date during the game. This representation was well done, as it made this kind of relationship seem normal and not out of the ordinary. In a pacifist or neutral run of the game, you meet two guards sent by Undyne to go to an area called Hotlands. They attack your character, and if you choose not to be violent in the fight with them, you can help one of them finally reveal their crush to the other and set them up. This is once again a beautifully done representation on Toby Fox's part, as it makes the relationship seem normal. These are both examples of an implicit, incidental, fixed representation. A more recent show that has appeared with queer representation is The Owl House, written by Donna Terrace. Within what we have seen of the show so far, it is setting up for a relationship between the main character, a human girl named Lucina Sarah, and an antagonist turned helpful part of the protagonist group, a witch girl named Amity Blight. It's stated that Luce is canonically bisexual and Amity is a lesbian. Looking at the first season of the show, Amity's crush on Luce is revealed over time. While we haven't seen much from Luce's side, in episode 2 of the second season, Luce is seen blushing after she is saved and fighting beside Amity. Not only is the main relationship set up to be LGBTQ+, there are also other confirmed queer relationships. Willow, a member of Luce's friend group, canonically has gay dads. These relationships are similar to the relationships shown in Undertale, as they show queer relationships as normal, while also bringing light to them. A classic show that includes LGBTQ+ representation is Shootout. While I have never seen the show myself, I did some research as to which specific queer moments were included in the show. Firstly, the main queer relationship between Adora and Katya was central to the plot of the show. The show's essential aligning in the central/incidental category we discussed earlier. It is also revealed that in season 2 that Bo has two dads, showing a gay couple having a happy family. This helps tell younger LGBTQ+ people that a family and happiness is possible. In season 5, it was confirmed that Natosa and Spinnerella were in a married relationship, normalizing a lesbian relationship. This has a similar effect as the above did. The show also includes many different gender expressions, as well as a non-binary character, Double Trouble. This helps normalize expressing yourself however you want, and exposing people to non-binary people to help reduce the discrimination they face. Also, the show doesn't place straight couples over queer couples, placing them on an equal pedestal, which is uncommon in the media. Finally, and most importantly in my opinion, the show shows that Katya and Adora get a happy ending. This is in contrast to the harmful barrier gaze trope that queer characters end up with unhappy endings or dead. Shira broke this trope by giving happy endings to LGBTQ+ characters. and Fire by Natasha and Jean. I'm so butchered that last name. I am so sorry. Within the story, the protagonist Lei, who was first to train and have sexual intercourse with the emperor of her land, goes on a forbidden relationship with one of her fellow paper girls, as they're called. Then, working together, they're able to escape the palace and the hell that they were kidnapped into. The story presents the reader with a romantic subplot that hits way too close to home for some LGBTQ plus people. If Lei and Ren were caught, the two of them would be exiled, or worse, killed. This is heavily similar to what a lot of LGBTQ plus kids growing up in homophobic households face. Our last example will be one most people are familiar with, queer representation in the Percy Jackson universe by Rick Riordan. Riordan is known for including minorities in his books. In the Magnus Chase series, he represents the Muslim culture through a character named, oh my god, I'm not going to be able to pronounce this, Samira al-Abbas. Multiple different ethnicities are represented through the numerous characters throughout all of Riordan's young adult novels. The LGBTQ plus community is highly represented in the universe, with multiple queer characters existing. First, there's Nico D'Angelo and Will Solis, one of the first gay representations in the universe. In the Magnus Chase series, we introduced Alex Ferreira, a gender-fluid friend/lover of the protagonist Magnus Chase. Magnus Chase himself is pansexual, and the god Loki is presented as gender-fluid in the book series about Norse mythology, Magnus Chase. In the Heroes of Olympus series, Reina Ramirez Arellano, I'm so sorry for pronunciation, who is asexual, and it is revealed in a later book series, Trials of Apollo, one of the protagonists by the name of Piper McLean is bisexual, or queer, depending on the way you look at it. This normalization of the LGBTQ plus community as people within the books is huge. It sets a precedent of how the world we're living in should be. If the teenagers who are constantly fighting for their lives and saving the world can respect the community, why can't we? While there are plenty of more recent amazing representations of the LGBTQ plus community, there are some that really take the cake for being so inaccurate and so damaging to the community. Now, I really don't have much experience in watching bad LGBTQ plus representation, so we'll rely on research to help with this section of the video. The following section will contain references to murder, violence, sex, and troubling concepts. If any of these make you uncomfortable, please skip this section by going to the timestamp on screen. Basic Instinct has a bisexual protagonist. So far, so good. However, Catherine Trammell, the protagonist, is presented as a murderous, psychopathic, violent, and sex-crazed individual. Story implies that bisexuals are obsessive and non-committal, not to mention fully ready to have sex with any woman or man in the general vicinity. Catherine also solidifies a toxic idea of women having sexual intercourse with other women purely for the benefit of an onlooking man. Yeah, no, you gotta say no on checking this one out. Next on a horrifying trip to destructive and damaging quote-unquote LGBTQ plus representation, we stop at a Hannibal Lecter film, The Silence of the Lambs. Okay, so in the movie there is a serial killer named Buffalo Bill. He's known for killing and skinning women. It is eventually revealed that Buffalo Bill was denied a sex change operation and resulted in instead skinning women and wearing their skin. Because that's what you do when you're trans, right? Right? Okay, we're moving on now. I can't do this anymore. What do you mean the second one is also about those trans people? Okay, now, why the hell? Now, let's talk about Ronnie Z-Man Barzell from the Beyond the Valley of the Dolls. So, not only does this film depict a similar toxic lesbianism as Basic Instinct, it also has toxic transgender character like The Silence of the Lambs. It's a 2-in-1 package, everyone! Okay, let's talk about Barzell, fully referred to as Z-Man from now on. So, Z-Man is the music producer who helped the protagonist make it big. Eventually, Z-Man tries to seduce a gigolo and then reveals that he has breasts. Following this, he decides to go out and murder 4 people. Probably more if he hadn't been killed. That's just what trans people do now. You trans people just go out and murder people now. Is that the new thing? I've been informed by my friends and team that I should stop talking about bad representation before I become an example of it. Not sure what they're talking about, but sure. Okay. I hope this video has helped you understand representation, its importance, and how to do it right. With that, this concludes episode 5 of Aequalitatem, an LGBTQ plus educational video series. As stated earlier, all resources used will be in the description below. Feel free to comment down below any criticism, questions, or anything I left out. Like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys on the other side. Bye!